The Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. Second Book. The Letter of BELICENA VILLCA. 62nd Day. The mist had dissipated, and we were again before the mirror of Farsi. We look each other, with the interrogation drew in our faces, conscious that we were facing the same dilemma. Who would respond to the order of carrying the wise sword to the valley of Cordoba? And who would assume the suicidal mission to distract the enemy? For me, it offered no doubts. I would occupy on the tactic of distraction. But I supposed, and I was right, that Noio would oppose to such decision. He told me that he was better prepared to offer the major resistance to the enemy. He would never surrender. I should travel with the wise sword, while would deviate behind his steps the attention of the enemy. It was very difficult, Dr. Sentinel, to persuade him that my plan was strategically superior. And it was because the same not aimed just to put in great guard the wise sword, but it contemplated the very probable possibility that the Lord of the Absolute Orientation, and his order of wise constructors, could also request from the Hyperborean wisdom of the House of Farsis, specially the valuable experience gathered through millenniums of fighting against the potencies of the matter. Who knew better that the Lords of Farsis, the synarchic conspiracy of the Gaulenes, affirmed today in all Christian churches, and their acting ways? And about Baray and Bishar? Who has more right than the Lords of Farsis, to discover their extermination sentences? According to my criterion, why at last was imposed, Noio would localize the secret cavern, and would be installed on it as Noio of the Stone of Venus, maintaining the custody until the day in which the Hyperborean pontiff could build the metaphysical bridge, and a Noio of his order of constructors could cross it, to communicate with the liberator gods. Being agree about who will perform each role, we committed to plan the particular strategy that will permit us to comply with the orders of the gods. The ideal strategy, according to what we decided, consisted in the creation of a chaotic climate around the ranch of Taffy, giving place to situations logically unpredictable that could favor our operation. Thenceforth, in the middle of a situation of high strategic value for us, but absolutely unrecognizable for any strange observer to the House of Farsis, Noio would emerge surprisingly with the wise sword, and would begin the travel towards the secret cavern. Simultaneously, our departure in the opposite way, ostensibly, to distract the enemy. I'd be rapidly detected, but the risk was calculated. The important was to gain time, remain the enough time, to permit Noio could arrive to the valley of Cordoba. With these purposes, we prepared in detail all the phases of the enterprise. 18 months later, in April of 1977, we already disposed of all the necessary, and we were adjusting the final steps. We had the 2 bags, with undetermined stones, the lapazza positions, ready to practice the strategic opposition. And was all prepared to create the chaotic climb that the circumstances demanded. This would be achieved with the involuntary collaboration of the army. I'll explain it better. Systematize the struggle against the guerrilla. The army had divided the country in 6 zones. The third zone included the provinces of Cordoba, La Rioja, Catamarca, Salta, Jujuy, Santiago del Estero, and Tucumán. In Tucumán, Sudzan 113 included the region of our ranch, and at its command was the Captain Diego Fernandez, loyal comrade of my son. In combination with him, Noio didn't achieve to mount a gigantesque operative of closure and monitoring in the Sudzan of Tafí del Valle for the middle of April in 1977. The objective of the operation aimed to the annihilation of a column of ERP, Revolutionary Army of the People, which acted in the Sudzan supported by some dwellers members of the PRT, Revolutionary Party of the Work People. In that black night for the communists, the army would obtain many hours of free zones, during which the electric supply would be interrupted, and their commands would be deployed around the whole city of Tafí del Valle and neighbor populations, with the finality to capture the subversives. They would go over secure targets, real agents of the subversion, and irregular combatants. The majority of them had been signalized by Noyo. For this reason, Noyo requested as tactical cover to at the break of our home, and simulate his detention. That would keep away the suspicions of the enemy, alleged. When all was ready for the action, was agreed that Diego Fernandez in person would take care of his false capture, with the objective to prevent the imponderables, or confusions that could emerge if other militaries intervene, and in this manner assure his immediate release. Freedom that Noyo would utilize to disappear for a while. Naturally, nothing of this would happen, due to Noyo would departure with the wise sort disposed to never return to Taffy Del Vale. But his comrades of the army didn't know it. According to the repressive methodology that armed forces employed in the anti-subversive struggle, they never utilized search warrants, or even gave part to the justice in the nocturnal raids of the type that they carried out in Taffy Del Vale. The suspicions were simply kidnapped, passing then to form part of the even more suspicions category of disappeared. Then, in the posterior day of the raid, Noyo figured as one of the 200 disappeared of Taffy Del Vale. To start the representation of my role, I went to the tribunals, and presented the useless habeas corpus, with the other familiars of the disappeared people. The legal resource, as was already a costume, was rejected, due to the judges shared the official methodology, or they just feared to increase the fatidical list of missing persons. And occurred that, due to they didn't had a reasonable official answer about the where was my son, I began to move by my own, at the beginning, very slow and dissimulated, but later, when I could make full use of the strategic opposition more rapidly, until I disappeared completely. For the desperation of the enemy, who promptly was behind my steps, I used to vanish completely, in determined sight, and appear as if by magic, sometimes in places very distant. I advanced and returned over my steps, disconcerting permanently who were watching me, in Jujuy, in Taffy Del Vale, then in Bolivia, and again in Tucumán, in just few hours, if the time serves as any reference in the magical war which I've undertaken. Furthermore, the enemy was unable to determine the world in which I was in every moment. If they encountered with the Las Opposiciones, for example, could happen that, when following the path through I supposedly took, they could find a Taffy Del Vale, in which the VILLCA's family never lived. Or with the BELICENA VILLCA, who never married or had children. Or with the world in which the subversive struggle never occurred, etc. However, I permitted to be detected to attract the enemy, each time with more violence, over me to obtain the search distraction effect. Meanwhile, Noyo would advance tranquil towards the valley of Córdoba. During one of those surprising returns to Tucumán, Segundo, the Indian, who was descendant of the people of the moon, who served us as a steward in the ranch, informed me that the Captain Diego Fernandez wanted to find me before leaving to the third zone, due to he was designed for a new destination. I phoned him to the regiment, and we arranged a meeting in the Parque de El Catalil. There, we had the following dialogue. "Good morning, Madame," saluted the captain. Likewise I replied laconically. "You and your son, my good comrade Noyo, have me very worried, Mrs. BELICENA. You would have to tell, where is he? Oh, warn him that contact us immediately. Things have changed a lot in these years, and it is urgent to put him up to date about the events." I shrugged for any answer, not disposed to deny, neither to confirm anything, but attentive to the information that I could obtain from the official. I was in operations, as well, performing a tremendously dangerous maneuver in the essential war, that such soldier could not eve dream. And the own discipline of this war demanded to distrust from everyone and everything, even from the comrade of my son. All the not initiated men could be betrayed by their souls, emotionally dominated, and converted in instruments of the demiurge Jehovah Satan. I could not run any unnecessary risk. However, Dr. Sentinel, seeing the things at the distance, I can assure today that Captain Diego Fernandez was honest in what he said, and that Noyo had not erred to trust in him. As I didn't say anything, the captain continued with energy. You should concede more importance to my words, Mrs. BELICENA. I think that you're informed that the disappearance of your son was simulated. I led the operation group that raided your ranch and arrested him. I was who allowed him to flee a few hours later. He was one of our secret agents, apart from the retired official of the army, and the case remained well documented in the area of the intelligence. Exists my informed to the Commandant G-2 about what happened that night, and also the previous documents of the operation, whereas registered that Noyo was one of ours. The disappearance was necessary to give tactical coverture to his position, but it was not necessary to exaggerate extending needlessly his absent. Mrs. BELICENA, he should have been returned long ago, or have communicated with us. I won't hide you now that his situation has worsened incredibly. Even you, Mrs. BELICENA, are running mortal risk with your amazing decision to initiate a personal quest for your disappeared son. Don't you understand that, with such attitude you are acting at the side of the subversives, and you can be accused openly as such? Don't believe that everyone knows the luck of your son in that night. In reality, only a group of officers of intelligence know it. But they have not spoken yet. Neither can they do it, because if they do it, your son Noyo would be exposed to a secure death in hands of the subversive organizations, due to, even our intelligence service is infiltrated by them. But you, with your absurd acts, have attracted the eye of other intelligence services, and you are even watched and followed by other members of our own force who ignore the reality of the facts. And you see now, in what naughty plot it has ended. If we keep silence to protect Noyo, our comrade, we risk the life of his mother, because, if the confusion continues, no one knows what measures could take the other operation groups that repress the North. And if we talk, we save his mother, but we discover dangerously the function of Noyo, what will require, at the end, of a real disappearance to recover the lost security, perhaps a permanent change of identity, or the prolonged eradication in another country. Do you understand the problem now, Mrs. BELICENA? We want to know what to do, because, whatever we do, we must realize it soon, with urgency. As I said before, due to, things have changed adversely for those who profess the National Socialist ideology. Amongst them is, of course, the comrade Noyo. Then, I disposed to give a concrete answer to the captain. His eloquence had permitted me to evaluate the situation from another perspective, and I comprehended that would be catastrophic for our strategy if the comrades of Noyo clarify the situation, revealing what happened the night of the disappearance. I had been affirming invariably, in every occasion, and before any audience, that my son Noyo had been murdered by the repression forces. The enemy could not prove it, with certainty neither deny it, due to, in those days existed thousands of similar cases, of persons who disappeared as Noyo, without leave any trace. But, a stone of Venus had been moved, according to what the traitor gods perceived, and simultaneously my erratic displacement had begun, through the different worlds of the Argentinian North, and other countries of South America. And could not be other thing than a strategy, against the plans of the wide fraternity, strategy that the demons expected to counteract, since 400 years ago. That was what they believed hitherto, because they ignored completely the maneuver of Noyo. However, all would collapse if the militaries clarify the case and the enemy becomes aware about what occurred after the kidnapping. Without abandoning my persecution, they would reorient the quest to Noyo, and they would put in danger the strategic objective of his mission. So, I had to prevent that the military speak. Moreover, because from the words of the captain, was inferred that the urgency was caused by a change that would turn impossible any clarification. Surely, it would be the political change announced by Captain Kiev, the one that would submerge the nation in an economic and moral ruin, and would leave it, bound and gagged in hands of the international synarchy. Trying to dissipate the preoccupation of the captain about my luck or the state of Noyo, I responded, suddenly loquacious. You're experiencing founded fears about what can occur or about the future of Noyo, I affirmed. Certainty, I have exaggerated my role, now I see it clear, I lied, and I promise you that from now on, I will stop representing it. In what concerns to Noyo, I assure you that he is fine, although I ignore his whereabouts. He communicates with me through a secret mailbox, and I will not hesitate to write him immediately about all what you have told me. It will necessary to wait for a while, but I'm sure that when I inform him that is requested with urgency he won't delay to appear. Therefore, I suggest you to not innovate in the situation, and await the result of these measures. Nevertheless, I would like to know something concrete about the adversely changes that you have mentioned for our cause, in order to fundament the importance of the convocatory to Noyo. I see that you are reasonable, Mrs. BELICENA, said the captain, and I will soon illustrate the information that you have demanded me. The shebang is very simple. The nationalist and patriotic forces had been mobilized, in defense at the nation, had been betrayed from the summit of the government. The major chiefs of the armed forces have pacted with the occult organizations, petidaries of the world government, and they have decided to give the country for a financial looting that will destitute the economic foundations of the society. While this sinister plan was been elaborated and carried out, the only forces capable to react were entertained in a sterile struggle against insurgent organizations, whose authentic leaders never appeared. With this, was not only achieved to discredit the armed forces, and neutralize their future reaction. We have defeated militarily, but we will relentlessly in the political field, due to the economic problems that will emerge from the monetarist and synarchic policy that the government develops, will cause the oblivion of the society of the honorable objective of our strife, and will accuse us of the subsequent misery, a reality that will obsess them, because we'll touch daily their pockets and stomachs. Captain Fernandez was evidently inspired, and, for some moments, he reminded me the words of Captain Kiev. We were in that moment at the end of 1977, just 2 years after his appearance in the Chronicle of Taffy-de Vale, and not only his announcements were being fulfilled, letter to letter, but also existed clarified minds capable to understand the reality and discover the plans of the enemy. But this is not all, continued Captain Fernandez. The worst of all is that, once concluded the subversive struggle in the military terrain, unique field in which we were permitted to intervene, the government considers that the nationalist groups of the armed forces represent a potential danger for the synarchic plans, and has decreed its irremediably destruction. And this offensive has already begun, with the idyllic selection of the best experts in the subversive combat of the intelligence services, its isolation with views for present and future struggles, and inclusive with its assassination, executed by members of the foreign secret services, especially convoked for that effect. Gradually, synarchic groups in the intelligence services have appeared, with trained personnel, or directly of their service, by agents of Israel, with the Mossad, or the Shin Bet, from the United States of America, with the CIA or FBI, from England with the MI-5, MI-6, IS, the Soviet Union with the KGB, GRU, etc. And these organizations are following you, Mrs. BELICENA. And for this reason, it is urgent to clarify the things while we can, because it is probable that in very brief term, our comrades be completely neutralized and redacted from the active service, to be then sold, vilely to the same subversive forces against which we fought for years. We believe that the government plans to transfer the power to socialists or social democrats, who will allow to the left to adhere the enough liberty and power as to destroy the moral reserves of the nation that were especially concentrated in the armed forces. However, these men, who, in reality are mercenaries at the service of the synarchy, they will maintain the monetarist economic policy that will submit the nation to the moral dependence and the social dissolution. In the same case of me, I have been retired without explanations from the anti-communist strife, with the evident intention to be destituted soon, or in something worse, on my rest comrades. Thus, it is imposed the necessity to act now, or run the risk that the situation of Noyo be never clarified, and that you can be attacked by some of the new groups of intelligence that act now with total impunity and repugnant lack of honor, and that usually persecute and execute persons of nationalist past, before the well-known agents of the Marxist subversion. I hope to have been clear, Mrs. BELICENA, and that you be capable to establish a prompt contact with the comrade Noyo, for whom we also request, in this crucial hour, his valuable strategic advice. You have been extremely clear, Captain Fernandez, I assured, and be sure that I will transmit textually your words to my son Noyo, who surely will not hesitate to communicate with you. And in this manner ended such conversation with Captain Diego Fernandez, who left disposed to wait, and to make wait his comrades as well, all possible declaration about the disappeared of Taffy Devale. The rest of the history is already known by you, Dr. Signal. I, far from complying with what I promised to Captain Diego Fernandez, I continued realizing strategic movements in the Argentinian north, Bolivia, and Peru. I traveled in many opportunities, through the route of Leto of Tarsis, and the Atamurunas, conscious that it would await even more the interest of the wide fraternity, and I would affirm them, in the certainty that I was keeper of the wise sword. For this purpose, I also took the path of Tataranga in Jujuy, and I go to the proximities of the hill Calabar. In 2 opportunities, inclusive, I descended to Great Valley, and contemplated the Costa Stellina, although not daring to cross the Varuna door. Well, was during one of these excursions, that I fell in a Gulin's ambush, and I ingested the poison that debilitated my will, and prevented me to continue developing the strategy. Then, I was rapidly captured by a commando of the Shin Bet, integrated by rabbis initiated in the High Kabbalah, priests who had contemplated the Spheric in Israel, and knew all what referred to the fire holocaust. They formed part, just as Captain Fernandez anticipated, to a parallel intelligence service, which counted with members in the services of the Army, Navy, Air Forces, Federal Police, Secretariat of the State Security, Ministry of Defense, etc. Its power mobilization was absolute. I was resting momentarily, in a miserable inn of Calipampa. There, they introduced me the drug, mixed in a jar of molasses, that offered to sweeten the coffee. The effect that it produced instantly in my body of hyperboreanitate was indescribable, being very improbable for you to imagine, because you don't know how a mind capable to possess consciousness in my worlds at once behaves. I'll just tell you that the drug, a flawless form of archetypal honey, produced an accelerated process of anemic strengthening, a formidable injection of energy for the instinctive will of the soul, that, in the Hyperborean initiates, is usually dominated by the irresistible will of the uncultured spirit. And the sudden evolution of the soul caused a sanguineous degradation, like a weakening of the symbol of the origin, present in the pure blood, as an actualization of the physical body, which lost all its capacities to move independently from the time, and synchronized all its biological clocks with the time of this world. Therefore, I remained prisoner of the cultural context, attached to the reality of such little population of Jujuy. Naturally, I tried to escape anyway. The lapis oppositionis were not useful anymore, because I lost the external orientation towards the origin, and resulted impossible for me to practice the strategic opposition. But I didn't reach too far. Before leaving the province, I was already in hands of the agents of the Shin Bet. They guided me to the Franciscan monastery of Our Lady of Miracles, in Salvador, Jujuy, where most of the priests seemed to be under their orders. In a sordid dungeon, from the times of the colony, I was submitted to a refined interrogation, during which many different drugs were administered to me. The questions were few and precise, always the same. Where was the extraterrestrial stone? What happened with my son Noido? Where I was going to? What were my orders? Was any terrestrial contact, some initiate who shares the operation, or I was just by myself? Abbreviating, Dr. Sentinel, I believe that I ended to confess almost everything, unable to resist the effect of the drugs, which avoided me even the representation of the sign of the death. With it, I could disembody right there. Anyhow, Noido was already safe in the secret cavern. I sensed it, long time ago, and I received confirmatory signs of the gods. I was falling, but the strategy was triumphing. The command of the Lord of the War had been totally accomplished, and nothing, from part of the House of Tharsis, would avoid the final battle. Now, was only missing that the Hyperborean Pontiff, the Lord of the Absolute Orientation, and his order of wise constructors, find the wise sword, and that was completely out from our hands. As you will comprehend, these reflections belong to the present. In such terrible moment, when my will resulted impotent to dominate the tongue, an indescribable anguish affected me. I was being humiliated in my dignity of hyperreninate, and I felt as a betrayal, as an unforgivable lack of honor, the involuntary confession that they were extracting from me. Even though we had already considered such possibility. But, in those moments I just wanted to die, even if the damn rabbis not desired anything else than to conserve me alive. I was barely physically tortured, due to, all their actions were directed to bow down and destroy my psychic structure. They were not going to kill me, and they said it clearly, because my body was untouchable, as the one of Rudolf Hess, Dr. Sentinel. I was reserved for a ritual sacrifice, that Barayan Bishar, in person would effectuate.